Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. Lately, I've been talking a lot about some trends that I'm seeing that are bullish for gold and bearish for the US dollar, and I've been promising that I'm doing my homework to bring some new stories to my audience. And I'm really happy to bring this new company on my coverage. They're in Finland. There's been some great action because of Rupert's success over there. And it's a greenstone belt where they're looking for orogenic gold systems. I love those orogenic gold systems. And I've got Patrick Highsmith from Firefox on to tell us all about Firefox. Thanks for joining me, Patrick.
Yeah, good to be here with you, Allan.
Well, I think maybe we should start first of why orogenic gold deposits are so important. We saw the huge success of Kirkland Lake with their Fosterville mine and the Swan Zone. And, they were already a big company when they started mining that. And it drove their stock up dramatically because it was such low cost production, and ultimately got them bought out. And you guys are a little company looking for your own Swan Zone.
Yeah, Allan, there's a good solid technical reasons behind the passion for orogenic gold among many explorers. For me, it really dates back to Newmont in the early 2000s. And we looked globally, Allan, at all the big major types of gold deposits we were looking for. And we realized at that time that the economics for orogenic and sediment-hosted gold were really the strongest on our balance sheet at that time. And so we prioritized, obviously, Newmont's home in Nevada, very important, Carlin type, sediment-hosted gold, obviously. And orogenic ranked very high. And the reason for that was the relatively low cost of production for orogenic. And you could bulk out large resources, of course. They have size, but they also, as you were indicating there, have grade. And in Finland, I was first there, actually a little bit before my time at Newmont, but I spent a lot of time there with Newmont from between 2005 and 2008. And we realized even then that greenstone belt in northern Finland, everywhere you saw the gold, it had grade. There just wasn't much work done yet, Allan. It had been a base metal camp, and nobody had really been drilling in that belt. And at that time, there was only one multi-million ounce deposit. There are now two, and it's growing fast. And I really like orogenic gold for its grade potential. And of course, that attracts the suitors, which are the big guys, which want to build the mines. We want to find them, and we want those guys to build them usually.
So some of the hallmarks of an orogenic gold system is you need those greenstone belts, those old rocks. Then you need cracks in those rocks that are crustal, that allow the fluids to have a path of least resistance to make their way up with that high-grade gold. And tell us a little bit about the rock packages and the faulting that you have on your property.
Yeah, now you're talking about the good stuff for us. As you say, you want to look at those Archean and Proterozoic greenstone belts, and you really like to see the ages. We used to get super dogmatic, it has to be 2.5 billion years old, or it has to be 1.5, or super specific. We realize now there's a little more breadth on those windows, but let's just say you want to be in the Proterozoic or the Archean greenstone belts, which we are. In this part of Finland, we have Archean rocks to the east and this Proterozoic belt that we're mostly working in a little bit to the west. And big through-going structures, Allan, in all of our maps in our presentation, you'll see this big black line winding across the whole terrain. And that's called the Serka line, or the Serka shear zone, or the Serka thrust zone. And that's that through-going fault, more than 100 kilometers of strike. If we were up in Timmins, we'd be talking about the Porcupine Dester. Here we're talking about the Serka, and we have that. And Firefox, the thing about us is it's kind of a land grab, Allan. We've got around 500 square kilometers of land there. It's a huge land position for a company our size. And the reason for that is we're nimble, we're fast moving, and we know that there are going to be more discoveries in this belt, and we don't yet know where they're going to be. The two multi-million ounce deposits in the belt, they're both quite different. Agnico Eagle's Kittilä mine is a high arsenic refractory system. Rupert's Ickery discovery is a low arsenic, non-refractory system with very different geochemistry. And so you got to be nimble. So we've got a lot of land situated on that major break I talked about, also on parallel splays to that break. That's where the Ickery discovery was made, was on a parallel splay to the Serca. And then there's these later structures, Allan, the D3, the third deformation event, or the fourth, that are either northwesterly or northeasterly or northwesterly striking, those cross structures. That hosts the big mine that Agnico has there, is on one of those big northeasters. So you'll see in each of our projects a summary of the structural geology setting, a lot of cross-cutting fabric in there. The good host rocks. You know what's another cool thing here, Allan? I'm sure you like these too, like I do. Ultramafic rocks in the belt. Do you have those high iron, high magnesium rocks, which can help destabilize those fluids when they're bringing up the gold and cause these things just to precipitate out high grade? Again, you'll see ultramafics widespread in the belt and on a number of the Firefox properties.
You brought up a couple of really important points there that I want to unpack a little bit. One is that these rocks that you're talking about are are the same story as some of the big belts in the world. And if you anywhere else in the world, you guys wouldn't have been able to get that big of property.
Well, it's a great story. It's a keen observation, Allan. And frankly, when I was there in 2005 with Newmont, I said, where are the gold explorers? You know, and we realized at that time that the mining law was changing in Finland. It was just becoming hospitable to big companies to move into the belt. And it needed another reform in 2011, the mining law, which it got, made it easier to take big packages of ground. But you know, at that time, most of the ground was held, Allan, actually by a couple of big base metal explorers. Anglo American had made a big copper nickel discovery called Sakatti, and First Quantum had come in with them, and they had pegged the whole bloody belt. So juniors couldn't really get a toehold in the gold side of things until about 2015, when these companies had to relinquish their holdings. It's expensive to hold ground there. And so a few fast-moving junior golds got in there. Orion, S2 Resources, and a private company called Magnus Minerals, which later vended its assets to create Firefox. So we were there early. The land was held by others for a long time. It became free. And then further, the thing we often see around the world in less mature terrains, it's all covered by glacial sediments, Allan. So it wasn't so obvious that these were the right rocks for a long time.
Not sticking out and saying, hey, come and look at me.
Exactly. It took time. It took drilling. And now we've got drilling happening there. And but really, the whole belt is held by these 4 juniors, 3 or 4 juniors, and 2 majors. And it's hard to get in there unless you're going to play ball with one of us or work with Agnico Eagle or B2, who hold big concessions there with the juniors. But the whole belt's kind of locked up. And as you go east, there's some ground available, but that's copper nickel territory over there. And you will see copper nickel explorers out there too, quite active these days.
Well, the other point that you brought up that really caught my attention is you talked about the primary structures and the secondary faulting. That complex faulting is indicative of a Swan Zone and Fosterville mine as well. I looked at some models of that, and you know, you got faults coming in at all different directions, and those secondary faulting is equally as important as the big crack.
That's absolutely the case. As you know, we often don't get the big deposits right on the main breaks. They're often on these secondary structures. Our Mustajärvi project, where we have high grade at surface, is an example of that. So far, it's fairly small, but we've got 600 gram meter holes there and growing. Pretty exciting. And you know, Quentin Henney, who looked early at the Fosterville story and was kind of a player in that acquisition by Kirkland Lake, he looked at these rocks and said the same thing. You know, he said, look, you've got textures here that look epizonal. They don't look super deep. There's some open space. You'll see some what appear to be quartz after calcite textures there, Allan, like we see in epithermal systems. There's some other indications that these aren't super deep, and yet there's been no deep drilling either. So we're sort of seeing the upper reaches of these systems, and there's a lot of potential at depth, as Agnico Eagle is finding at the Kittilä mine. So yeah, multiple structures, that creates plumbing for the fluids, of course. And then also the fluids have got to find the right host rocks. boy, that Rupert discovery at Ickery just seems to have perfect host rocks, Allan. Big volumes of mineralized rock because that rock was so reactive and it just sort of sucked it up like a sponge. Whereas a lot of what we've been drilling has been narrow and super high grade. We're now looking to see whether we have more of that replacement style of mineralization as well, those thicker volumes. So grade is good, but we also want to find the right host rocks, more reactive host rocks. And again, early days in the belt, so one can be surprised with these host rocks. Is it the mafic volcanics? Is it the sediments? Is it the contact between the two? That sort of thing. So all those machinations are going on right now with a lot of structural geologists in particular in Finland.
So, well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the one thing I've known about Finland, I spent a good part of my career in diamond exploration, and that Archean craton that Finland and Russia hold has some exceptional diamond discoveries on it. And when I was watching that, I was really impressed with the Geological Survey of Finland. They are super proactive about, I mean, they were doing presentations at the PDAC. Hugh O'Brien, he's a great guy. He's from the States, but he's now I think he's one of the top people at the Geological Survey of Finland. But he was out there doing presentations on behalf of the companies that were looking for diamonds. Real science-driven geological survey, and really proactive.
I would say, Allan, I've worked, like you have worked around the place quite a bit, maybe 40 countries. And I would say the databases in Finland are the best in the world. The entire country has been flown with MAG and EM at 200-meter flight lines. Wow. And get this, Allan, the whole country's been sampled on a 2-kilometer grid. Okay, literally the whole country. So you can bring up a map of Finland and look at, say, all gold in Finland or all cobalt in Finland from that historical database. Now, as you know, those government databases, they're not necessarily the perfect sample medium all the time. There can be inconsistencies in those databases. And especially with glacial cover, did you get the sample at the right part of the till or whatever? But that's a great starting point. And furthermore, they did real exploration. The Kittilä discovery that Agnico Eagle is now mining, historic resources and production totaling about 9 million ounces, that was a GTK discovery and a road cut. So Geological Survey of Finland discovery that later led to, of course, much more work and the growth that Agnico brought. Similarly, with many of the other projects in the country, the Geological Survey has done incredible work. They're still a great resource. We collaborate with them, work with them all the time. They have databases of old samples, Allan, that sometimes weren't even analyzed for gold, because Outokumpu didn't care about gold back in the day, right? So we sometimes have gotten access to those old samples and had them reanalyzed for gold. They have an incredible depository of historic core. I don't know if you got to see that facility, but it's world class. 7 buildings, I think, full of historic core that you can go query and have reserve time with your geologists to relog that core. That core can be sampled. What a library of knowledge. And you just start off right from the beginning with a head start when you're working in Finland.
As you're explaining that, I kind of thinking, I sure wish that more countries were like that. I know with my experience with Hugh O'Brien, it was a phenomenal amount of work that they had done for diamonds. And now it sounds like they did just as much work for metals.
Absolutely. And they've been doing it for a long time. And they're still a great resource, particularly in the north, of course, where it's less densely populated and that sort of thing.
So there's the right kind of rocks. You got the right kind of geological structures. There's known big mines there and big successes by juniors. Let's get a little more into Firefox. What have you guys done? What have you found? And what are you doing with it?
Well, we founded the company in 2017, so we're quite a new company. We listed it at the end of 2018. Our CEO is based in Finland. Carl Lofberg is our CEO based in Finland, and as are our exploration manager and most of our geological talent. So we're quite nimble. I'm chairman of the board, so I sort of help out mentoring the geoscience team and also working with Carl on financings and such. And so we got started in 2017, 2018. We've drilled every year in our existence, Allan. We know that's how discoveries are made. And as you know, we've been through some pretty tough down cycles in these last few years, but we've still managed to drill. But as I said, we have grabbed a lot of land. So our strategy is to keep a conveyor belt coming continuously because we just don't know where the next big discovery is coming. As we just saw 2 years ago with Rupert's spectacular discovery of the Ikari deposit, brand new discovery made from base of till sampling, a true greenfields discovery. Charlie Seabrooks, the exploration manager there, she's incredible, and she made that discovery with her team. And kudos to them for doing the hard work. Now, we operate by going, of course, to some historic occurrences in some cases where we knew there was high grade, for instance, like our Mustiarvi project had some historic high grade drilled by Outokumpu. We've expanded that into 2 more known pods of high grade mineralization coming to surface. And that's where we've been drilling high grade recently. We've recently had an intercept there of over 14 or just under 14 meters at 28.8 grams per ton, coming within 20 meters of surface there. Really exciting. We've just completed 5 or 6 holes around that, shallow holes to step out on that new high grade pod there. We early days on that one yet, but that was a historic showing. But we haven't ever stopped there, Allan. We keep doing greenfields work. So what we're doing is we now have, I think in total, 11 or 12 projects. 5 of them are fully permitted for drilling now. So we have drill-ready projects. We drilled 4 projects in 2022. And that means we're always going to be doing both the exciting but risky greenfields and also drilling more proximal to some known high grade, like we have at Mustiarvi or at our other Katiavara project, which is close to the town of Sodankila. So those are more advanced projects. We also have one called Sarvi, which is a nice large permitted project immediately north of the Ikari discovery. So Rupert is drilling to our south within 2 kilometers of our border, and we have ground immediately to the north of that on a similar set of structures and similar rocks. So what we're doing, I guess you'd say, Allan, is we're running both a generative strategy to target using these regional databases and try to acquire ground in the right places. And then bringing everything from early, till sampling at the early stages of a project right through to drilling offsets of high grade. As of yet, we have no resources. We're at the early part of exploration on all these projects, but Mustiarvi is our most advanced with about 11,000 meters of drilling, including, as I said, a number of nice, plus 100 gram meter intercepts, including that very recent zinger that's almost 400 gram meters I mentioned earlier. Wow. So it's a lot for a small company to do.
You really got to stand up and take notice when you hit a thick intersection like that of bonanza grade gold.
Yeah, it's exciting. And I tell you, that's one of the things that keeps me coming back to Finland since 2003 when I was first there. Each of the occurrences, they just tend to have sort of 5 grams laying around, and you go to West Africa, for instance, some great discoveries there. But in the early days there, we tended to see like 2 grams everywhere you went. It was oxide, which was nice. But here, it seems to be a lot more consistently high grade. And we can ask ourselves the reasons for that. We'll get super nerdy if we do that. But these terrains, as you know, they tend to have characteristics. And one of the things we see here is most of these occurrences have quite high grade. And that's a good thing to start with, of course.
Especially so close to surface.
Absolutely, because it's immature. It's one of those, and it's such a great jurisdiction. It's constantly rated amongst the least corrupt places in the world. The infrastructure is amazing, even north of the Arctic Circle where we are. So we just consider it a prized jurisdiction to be working in. And we also know the value in these places is in having the tenements. And so navigating the permitting system is fairly complicated, and it's fairly high cost to hold the land. So you want to make sure your team knows what it's doing and operates aggressively. When ground comes open, our team is understanding instructions to grab it, and they don't need a decision made outside of that time zone. The geologists are empowered to go acquire land and get moving on a prospect as soon as it becomes available. And with the holding costs there.
Something that's also quite important is I was listening not too long ago of an interview of Joe Mazumdar. And he was saying, because he does a lot of property visits all over the world. And during the COVID period, he was mentioning that the companies that had the least amount of problems and got through it the best were those that had senior executives in the country, in the jurisdiction where you're. So
Yeah.
having your CEO right there, where he can go down and talk to the geological survey guys or the mining recorders and things like that, is hugely important.
That's a great point, and it was an unexpected benefit, of naming Carl CEO when we founded the company. We didn't know, obviously, that COVID was coming. But the other bonus, I will say, just to plug Finland a little bit, if you had essential work to do, it never shut down. So I went to Finland several times during COVID and was able to operate there, being a director of a Finnish company, our subsidiary, and so forth. Sure, we had to take care of our legal work and operate safely. But with the help of our lawyer and the sort of business climate in Finland, I was also able to go there and work during COVID on several occasions. But we were operating continuously, and of course, the best place to go during a pandemic is maybe to the Arctic to go do gold exploration. So.
As I was looking in your PowerPoint prior to us doing this interview, something else stood out to me. Going back to my career in diamonds, a lot of the early players in the diamond scene in Canada got really big land packages. And the trick was to try to narrow the search down to what was important. And you guys are working with Goldspot, who uses big data and algorithms to filter out the noise and vector into where you should be looking for stuff. How has it been working with them, and how are those efforts going?
Yeah, it's a great point. Realizing that it's one of those terrains with consistent data sets over a large area, we did move pretty quickly towards big scale evaluation of geophysics and geochemistry, both before Goldspot was around and then when they came around, they helped us quite a bit. In fact, we hired Dr. Sven Hennig, our structural geologist from Goldspot. He'd been working for us, and he was kind of stranded in Europe because of COVID. And the Goldspot guys were great about it. We rang them and said, "We love this guy. Can we kind of hire him?" And they go, "Sure." Because as it worked out, it just was a good fit for them because he was kind of stranded in Europe, and so he came on our team full time, Allan, and he was one of their structural specialists. So yeah, we did exactly that. Now, we haven't even maximized the value of sort of AI tools because we have this, we're a small company and we've got to be drilling every year. So we can't sort of step back and focus as much as we might like on that. So I won't say we've optimized it, but if you look at the size of our properties, some of them are quite large, particularly some of the new applications we've made. And Goldspot's multivariate interpretation and machine learning approach to these data sets has already helped us generate targets. And we even used it at the small scale at Mustajärvi, where we use their tools to evaluate all that detailed structure. We drill oriented core on every hole, Allan, so we have a lot of good detailed fabric measurements in this core. And so we're able to put those in and use machine learning approaches to targeting off of that too. And you'll see some evidence in our presentation of the structural model we built in Leapfrog, which we don't tend to throw out into presentations too often because it's kind of hard to visualize without it being animated. But nevertheless, that's one of the things that factored into that. And Sven and the team at Goldspot were very important in our initial interpretations of that big shear zone at Mustajärvi with all those cross structures. So you're absolutely right. Of course, to target gold from airborne geophysics at 200-meter flight line spacing is not appropriate, right? You know how small gold targets are. However, it gets you in the neighborhood when you see these settings, and that's how we've used it.
You can get a picture of the structural story, which is,
yep.
You might not see an anomaly that says go drill is for gold, but you can understand the structures, which in the case of orogenic gold systems is extremely important.
Absolutely right. And that's how we've used it. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more of that type of work going forward. And I know that others are using similar tools with the high quality data sets in Finland.
Awesome. So you're in a great jurisdiction. There's been success there. You're in the right kind of rocks. You got the right kind of structural story. You've had some good mineralization in the drilling. and you've recently completed some drilling, and those results are pending. So it sounds like you'll have some news flow.
That's right. We drilled here in the beginning of Q4, October, November. We drilled a few holes to follow up on that high grade hole. Even in this soft market where the market didn't seem to care about news, Allan, Carl and the team realized we had to get out there and get a few holes offsetting that high grade, because we drilled what appear to be two different mineralized structural directions. So we had to go in and drill some holes in a different direction as well to figure that out. And boy, I'm so glad we did. So that data is pending. We didn't even get assays to the lab until late November, early December for all of that. So we expect mid-January or so, we should have some news flow from that. And I think that's a real testament to the persistence needed in exploration, Allan, because you tend to come out, you hit a narrow high grade zone, and the market sort of doesn't care if the rest of the market is soft. But if you're in an upswing, of course, a good intercept will get you more momentum, and your share capital responds favorably, and you can finance at a higher price. And so persisting through these cycles has just been absolutely key. And sometimes you make the discoveries at maybe the time that the market isn't really ready for it or appreciative of it. However, sometimes these things all fall into place at the right time, Allan. So we'll see. 2023 looks good, and we're pretty sure we'll be starting off the year with some, it'll certainly be exciting, and we hope it'll be positive news from our Musti RV project, where we've been consistently drilling some high-grade gold.
Something I've also been talking about on my shows lately is more of a strategic thing for junior mining companies. And I believe strongly that we're headed to a much more bullish market for gold. We've got the right kind of indicators happening with the gold price and the US dollar weakness. And I'm already seeing some companies that are bucking the trend of this difficult year that 2022 has been. And there's a common denominator amongst those companies. They're out there working on their properties, and they're eager to tell their stories. And it's those companies that are going to lead the charge. If I'm correct that we're heading into a more bullish market for gold, it's those companies that are going to lead the charge. And if you want to be on the lead the charge, and the only way to do that is to be out there working when it's difficult and eager to tell your story. So I'm really glad that, we've been able to get together and talk about the great story that you have at Firefox.
Well, yeah, great observation, and we appreciate your sort of noticing us out there on the horizon as well. You're quite right. I mean, it's funny to me. I've been working in Finland for so long. I'm sort of stunned when someone who's knowledgeable in the business says, "Well, wow, I didn't know there was gold in Finland." And I sort of go, "Wow, how could you have missed it?" But of course, there's so much going on. The world's a big place, and the flow of news really does ebb and flow, and so it's certainly true that a lot of people haven't heard. There's a greenstone belt emerging in Finland, and just a few juniors have control of most of the ground. That's a pretty exciting story.
Well, because, those greenstone belts are so prolific, and to be able to get a big chunk of land and, only have a few companies around you that also have big chunks of land, if big companies get excited, like you said earlier, they got to come to you.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, when I was at Newmont, that's what I did, business development, reaching out to the juniors. When I was at Fortescue Metals Group, that's what I did. And, let's face it, a junior company can move with can be much more nimble. It can pick up ground. We're locally based. We know the rules locally. We work with the indigenous people locally. So yeah, absolutely. We see it as kind of a partnership for discovery, and we're just filling the pipeline at the front end with a lot of property evaluation, a lot of drilling, a lot of talent applied. And we can do it with low overhead. And I think the cycle of discovery and development works well when the juniors are out doing things. And we have to do that kind of independent of these market cycles, quite frankly. We've got to get after it regardless of the goal.
And they create opportunities, though. Like I said, if this greenstone belt was in Canada or the United States or, other well-known mining jurisdictions, you guys never would have been able to get the kind of land package that you have.
Correct.
or
Absolutely
the
correct.
other juniors around you. They wouldn't
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely correct.
that
And
would
the
have been
drilling
Swiss
is
cheese.
just now happening in the belt because of the financing cycle has to take a while to unfold and everything, that there's enough drilling meters happening there that discoveries are going to come. And we see that with Rupert's work and to their credit, B2 Gold in their joint venture with Orion Resources has made another discovery just west of that called the Helmy Prospect. And we're drilling high grade at Mustiarvi just down the paved highway from there, about 15 or 20 kilometers. So yeah, it's happening now, Allan. It really is.
Well, good on you guys, and I'm glad we got to have this conversation. I think it's very timely because every year I do a tax law selling show that I'm putting out next week, and I think you guys are a real undiscovered gem that are you know, probably suffering from tax law selling, but you've got the other thing about tax law selling picks, they got to have catalysts to see them perform well in the new year. And it sounds like that's exactly what you guys are lining up for.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so. And you know, we're so passionate about it. We're raising money in bloody December, the worst time of the year to do it, you know, Allan. So we know we got to get out and do our work, and we're hot on the trail of something, excited about it, and we're happy to talk to folks about it. So thank you
Well,
for picking up the story. Thank you very much.
that in itself, being able to raise money at a difficult time only happens if you got quality story to tell. So I like what I hear, Patrick, and I'm looking forward to future interviews with you.
Well, thank you very much. We'll be here to chat anytime you like. And thank you for having us on, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's to you.
Same to you. I'm going to close it off, and you can hang around, and we'll have a chat at the end.
Okay.
So there you go, folks. As I mentioned during the show, I'm seeing some exciting trends that are happening for gold, and weakness in the US dollar that's shaping up for a good gold market. And the gold stocks have not, for a lot of them, have not been moving as well. Some of them are, and they're bucking the trend. And the common denominator, as I said to Patrick, is those that are out there working and eager to tell their stories are the ones that are going to be leading that trend that I see coming in 2023. Actually, has already started in late 2022. Gold is now trading well above its 50-day moving average, and also trading above its 200-day moving average. And it's looking like it's going through that famous golden cross in January. So you want to be working in December and October, November, and being able to put out results in this January and more work in the first quarter. And that's exactly what Firefox has. And I know Finland, and it's an exciting place. And I think they've got something real special there, and an undiscovered gem that I hope you do your homework on, speak with your financial advisors. By the way, go to their website, look at their news releases, and look at their corporate presentations, because that'll help you understand the big picture story around them, what's going on, what specifically they're doing. And I think you'll be impressed with the story, especially for a company that only has an $11 million valuation. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.